wow, is this it? Is my tombstone going to say she worked? As women, we should ourselves to death. We should be the best employee. We should be the best mother, the best wife, the best grandma. It is exhausting shooting ourselves to death. And so I get women to think about putting themselves first. I think the first thing that we need to do is to look at change differently. One of my favorite things is, you've got this. I've got this. I can do this, and really to embrace that.
Now what? A question so many of us are asking, but in particular, women, professional, career women who are older, whatever that means. What is that, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s? Who have had these careers, who have overcome so much and have worked so hard, and for whatever reason, it's time to change. It's time to transition to something else. Now what? That's the big question. How do I find my new way forward? Well, the answer to those questions, the first answer is, there is an answer. And to help you with that is my guest, Autumn Nessler, who has worked with professional women, counseled them, coached them, helped them develop an intentional life plan to help make sure the years ahead are some of, if not the best. And another reason why she really knows what she's talking about is she's one of you.
There's millions of women out there today who are thinking about what could life look like if, when I leave the big job, right? So, I think about, unfortunately, we are such a huge group of people, and we're all kind of looking at this at the same time and deciding what to do next and what will life look like. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of role models to kind of help us navigate what's next. That's good and bad, right? So the good news is we get to craft our own plan. We get to determine what it's going to look like for us as a whole generation, which is pretty darn exciting. We have been told, for many years, and those women that are listening today will really appreciate, there used to be a commercial, the Angelique commercial. It was a really bad perfume. But really, that was kind of the model, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, for women like me. We were supposed to bring home the bacon, fry it up in the pan, and oh, by the way, never let you forget you're a man, right? And oh, by the way, do it all in high heels. So we've been kind of living under that model for many, many years. So now we're looking at this life, this post-career life, I'll call it. And for many of us, we're not ready. Like you said, we're not ready to, hang up whatever, the high heels or whatever we're going to do. In fact, we have a great opportunity to think about what it might look like for us, whether it includes work or not. But at the end of the day, it's our opportunity to navigate these uncharted waters. So it's a very exciting time.
Yeah, as I've been advocating for all of us for so long is looking at this stage of life. I hate the word retirement. Now,
Yes.
For some people, it's right. God bless you. Godspeed. Go for it. You've earned it. But how many people have we heard about? Significant number who have just said, oh, well, I guess I retire and I take a 40-year vacation, because you have some decades of life ahead, decades of increased health span ahead. And also we're a generation that lived in a different existence where we have a desire and a need to signify and be relevant. And for those who do try retirement and quote unquote fail at it, it's because they've lost that relevance. And that's why alcoholism, drug abuse, divorce, and things of that sort are on the increase. So it would seem that in what I'm running across is that people get that awareness of, oh my gosh, you're right. I've got all these years, I don't feel like I'm 50 years old. I don't feel like I'm 65. I feel like I'm 40. But you're lost in terms of trying to figure out, oh my gosh, all of a sudden I've got to almost like come up with a plan like I did in college, and I was more prepared then of what I'm going to do with my life.
Right. Yeah. And I always talk about, and you're kind of alluding to it as well, is that as individuals, we go through numerous changes in our life, right? Numerous. And, some of those happen by by choice, getting married, or by opportunity, we take that next big job, we take that big offer. It could happen by a natural end, whether it's graduating from college, or it could be something unwillingly imposed on us. Can you say pandemic, right? So at the end of the day, these things are what really, kind of give us those aha moments, those, looks in the mirror, that kind of conversation that we have with ourselves when no one else is around, to get us to start thinking about, wow, is this it? Is my tombstone going to say she worked? I mean, so this, I really believe that what happens, especially for women, is there's been some significant change. The last child leaves for college, or the marriage ends, or, we lose our jobs, or it could be that ourselves or significant others have health concerns. Something has happened that's caused that moment of pause to say, really, that is it. And I think often, as you and I talked about before, I've had many conversations with myself in ladies' room mirrors, and I'm brilliant. I'm the best one person board of advisors I have. But it is those moments that really transform our thinking. And it's really that change. It's that event that happens. So it's, and I like to say, is there a certain age? Yeah, probably at 50 plus for women anyway.
Well, and you had one of those moments yourself. How did it impact you?
Yeah. Well, I've had several, but the one that had the most significance was during a blizzard in a major hospital in Delaware, emergency room, ladies' room. We had just come by ambulance. My husband had had another heart event. This was not our first rodeo. I had many of those over the years. And so it was myself and the nurse sitting in this waiting room. And the door swings open in the back, and out walks a priest. This sounds like the beginning of a really terrible joke, but it's not. So he makes his way over to the nurse's station. She looks up and points at me. He comes walking over to me. Now you can imagine, conversation is going on. That's it. I've lost him. Life is the way I knew it. It's going to change dramatically. He had just come out, obviously, to give me an update, thank God, on my husband, and that the doctor would be out shortly. Well, when I felt my legs again, that led me to a ladies' room. And it was that conversation where I said, enough, I'm done. How many more times does this have to happen for me to understand I need to make some dramatic, significant changes? And so bringing him home after he was stable, getting back to our normal, whatever that was, it really led me to go down a path, start my practice in intentional life. And because it was all based on that conversation, that wake up opportunity that I had, that I listened to this time, because I've had many of those conversations over the years in those mirrors, but never that's had that kind of significant impact.
So if I maybe haven't had that stunning moment, and we've all had those in our lives, and I've had them too, and I often wonder why life and existence is so clear in those moments, and we can't make them clear when everything's kind of status quo, but maybe a little topsy-turvy, ergo pandemic, or maybe at work you're being shown the door. So what can we do to even get us in that place to start like going, wait a minute, I really have to, and this is partially my take, so please go in another direction, I really got to have some perspective and intention as to how I want to live the rest of my healthy life, which could be 30, 40 years at least.
Right.
And to, quite frankly, think of it in a totally different way than I have in my entire existence or society has ever looked at it, meaning my options are probably more broad than I ever could imagine. It doesn't just mean, but it could, that I keep doing what I've been doing professionally. How do I get to that perspective and mindset?
Well, I think it's, um, first of all, I think it's taking the opportunity to look at change differently. So, we use you hear the terms change and transition used interchangeably, right? Where in fact, they're very different things. Whereas a change is that external event that happens, that graduating from college. The transition is that gray zone that happens next. And, I use the visual with the women that I work with of the tightrope walker. And that platform that we're standing on, that ending has just happened. And across that big abyss of space is that other platform. And we have to figure out how to navigate across that with or without a safety net to get to that other side, to get to that new beginning. So here's where I think the problem lies. And to answer your question, I think the first thing that we need to do is to look at change differently. And by that, I mean to look at the change, to pause and look at the change that's just occurred, the ending that's just occurred, with openness and curiosity. To embrace it, to look at it as that opportunity for us to sit back and reflect, and to realize that we need to honor that time, to grieve maybe what's happened, the loss that's just occurred, to just really think through what it could look like getting to that other side. And then I really work with individuals to think about those strategies, those transition strategies, to help them get across that big abyss of space. Because most of us, especially women, we tend not to ever put ourselves first. So that's the first thing that we do, is we really transform our beliefs about, what this change and transition could offer us as an opportunity. So I don't know if that kind of answer your question, but I think it's first and foremost embracing the change that's just occurred, taking a time to pause, reflect, and think about navigating that space to get to that other side.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you brought up that analogy, because in an interview that I did with Richard Leider, the author of The Power of Purpose and 10 other books, and he has a new one coming out, which is, and I might not get the title exactly right, but Who I Want to Be When I Grow Old, about living a purposeful, intentional life as you get older. And he uses the analogy of the trapeze, in which you're swinging on this one, and then, like right now, both with the pandemic, which I was specifically referring to, but also in your context, it's that moment when you're letting go, and you're grabbing hold of the other one. And I mean that's challenging, and that's scary, because you are requiring an entirely new mindset to and opening up possibilities you maybe haven't even considered. I mean, in your experience, have you found that to be a challenging and difficult thing to do?
Most of us avoid it at all cost, because somehow that period, that great abyss, somehow that is seen as almost like the way we're feeling. Like that transition period, that gray zone, Paul, as you know, can last for days, weeks, months, sometimes even years, which is awful. And most of us just want to get to the other side. We don't want to deal in the muck. We don't want to deal in the gray zone. We want to move forward and do it now. And when I talk to women about honoring that transition period, they're not comfortable with that. They're used to taking action. I got to get through this. I got to move forward. And, it's very difficult. So yes, absolutely. Most people, men and women, just not women, but most people don't want to be in that gray zone, be in that transition period, because it just is not comfortable for us. And we're used to being action-oriented individuals, right? We set goals, we move forward, and so most people will avoid it at all cost.
So what's your methodology? What are your strategies? I mean, kind of take us from ground zero, going, okay, now what do I do through that transition and into something successful?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, the first things first, of course, is looking at change differently and honoring that pause and taking that opportunity. And then the first thing I always talk about is transforming our beliefs. You know, and realize that what we're going through and about to go through, we've done it so many times before. When we think about all the changes and periods of transition that we've all been through, and guess what? We've done it with 100% success. We're here talking about it. So the first thing I really encourage people to give themselves the message, one of my favorite things is, you've got this. I've got this. I can do this, you know, and really to embrace that. You know, and we then talk about reframing our perspective. And that by that I mean, you know, as women, we should ourselves to death. We should be the best employee. We should be the best mother, the best wife, the best grandpa. You know, it is exhausting shooting ourselves to death. And so I get women to think about putting themselves first, especially during this time. Now, for many people, when I say that to them, their initial response is, that sounds awfully selfish. And I'm supposed to be caring for everybody. I can't put myself first. And I always use that airplane analogy. You know how they always say, put your oxygen mask on first before you do it for the kids? It's actually a selfless opportunity for them to pause, to reframe their perspective, because not only are they benefiting themselves, but they're benefiting all those around them, all of them that are part of their tribe. We then also talk about invigorating our thinking. You know, we're so busy wearing so many different hats, juggling so many different roles, that our thinking is very clouded at that point. And so I have found two phrases that I absolutely love, and I use them myself all the time. And the phrases are, what if I looked at this as a whole different opportunity for myself? Imagine if I took the next year of my life and did something totally different. So just those two phrases, I don't know what it does in the brain. I'm not a neuroscientist, I have no idea, but it just tweaks something in our brain to reimagine, recreate, redesign. It just excites us. You know, and the fourth strategy, of course, is most of us don't clarify timing. And my comment is always to them, if not now, when? If not now, when, right? Because, you know, we can find every excuse in the world, every excuse not to take the time to do what I'm talking about. And so I just remind people that you got to do it. You know, we don't get do-overs, right? So it's that opportunity. And finally, like any good thing, any plan requires action. So taking purposeful action and sitting down and really thinking about what it could look like. And this is all before we get to that other platform, right? It's that transition process that we should embark on each and every time some change has happened in our world that's gotten us to start thinking differently.
Now, if you're in a relationship with a significant other in whatever context, what do you do about that in terms of getting them aligned and on board? And just a real quick story. When I hear about people going through the retirement honeymoon, when one partner, especially one partner who works and the other person maybe didn't work that much, for a while it's really great. But one of the things that they find is that there's discord because the person who, for instance, wasn't working much has their own life, and the other person's like, hey, here I am. Or they want to transition to something and the other person isn't on board. And I know it can literally lead to divorce.
It does.
The big relationships in your life when you're starting to undertake it, let alone actually doing it.
Yeah. And I think part of it is, you know, my husband and I are still trying to figure this all out. So when I was, you know, after that ladies' room here in the hospital, and really the conversation between us, my husband and I, started when I got him home, when things were stable, when we were getting back to a normal life. And that's when the conversation really started. And I think part of it is, you know, so on an annual basis, my husband and I go on an annual retreat. We do a planning retreat. And during that time, we plan individual goals as well as a couple. And that's kind of the end result of all the work that kind of led up to where we are today. The initial conversations were all about, how do you envision? What are you thinking about? What would be the ideal, situation for you? What would your life look like if in an ideal world? Because a lot of times those visions are so completely different. And I was working with a client who said her husband, she was scared to death. Her husband was an attorney, was retiring within the next 12 months. She herself had a big career, had retired, taken the package, and was so bored within a year she was back to work. So now she and her husband are facing this 24/7 together. And she came running, screaming to me, saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this. You need to help me. And so part of it was because when she asked him what life was going to look like for him, his ideal was he would get up, have coffee, read the paper, go to the gym, and come home. And she said, okay, so that takes you to 9:30. So now what? And so his vision of what he saw day to day looking like and her vision were very different. So you're right. The first thing you need to do with your significant other is to figure out where each of you are. What is each of your visions? And then figuring out what a vision together might look like. Because, they're still separate, but together life that you have to think about. And that's what an intentional life, includes, is that how do I want to be and how do we want to be? And it's those two visions that really need to be mapped out and nailed down. And as I mentioned, my husband and I do this kind of planning on an annual basis. So any type of intentional life planning process that I talk about is only for a 12-month period of time. If I started to think about, because I intend to live to 100, if I thought about planning for the next 40 years or 30 plus years, it would be impossible. So I do it 12 months at a time. So I think part of the whole thing is having those initial discussions, because really when it comes down to it, it could be very, very different visions that we both have.
Define for me what you mean by an intentional life.
Well, I guess looking at ideally and I look at it almost like I think about a recipe. I remember reading an article, this guy, Andy Cohen out of Canada. He wrote an article called The Tapas Life, great article. And when he thought about his retirement, he was about a year into retirement, and he was bored out of his mind. So he started looking at retirement or that post-career life or his intentional life as being little small plates of things that he enjoyed doing to kind of map out what an ideal day, what an ideal week, whatever it was. And so an intentional life is something that you do with planning, with thought, with listening to that inside voice, with drawing on the best of our wisdom, our success, and our experience to date. You don't have to start from scratch when you think about living an intentional life. You just have to take the best of what was, what has been, what is now. And that's what you need to kind of craft. I talk about my life, my intentional life, as being a recipe. And the recipe that I do all the time is taking the best of the ingredients, because I listened to what I knew my life needed to include those ingredients. I knew I wanted to utilize my time and talents. I knew that I wanted to learn. I know that I wanted to create and connect And I had all these different ingredients. And so I was crafting the perfect dish for myself. But as I said, everything is up for discussion. Everything is up for, change. And so having an intentional life is knowing what your recipe needs to include, and pulling from the best of all those ingredients from what your life has been about.
I think that's really strong, and I couldn't agree with you more. It takes some self-examination and some
Yes.
self-awareness, and I know that a real epiphany in this general topic that we're talking about came when I was talking to a friend, colleague, a woman who's in her 30s, two young children, and she was like, yeah, I'm kind of wondering, what am I going to do with that phase of life myself, because she was following what I was doing with my endeavor. And it really did hit me, and that is that, okay, if you look at somebody in college and receiving as a very popular graduation gift Dr. Seuss's "Oh, the Places You Will Go," and
Yes.
it struck me that, like, okay, when you're graduating high school or college, it's like you've got the road ahead and all the possibilities and the challenges and the successes and the people that you'll meet and the differences that you can make in the decades ahead. And it's like, okay, you're 50 or 60 years old, you got that road ahead, and you've got all the people you'll meet and the challenges and the opportunities and the successes in the decades ahead. And I thought, wow, what a great gift for somebody turning 55 or whatever. But the
Yeah.
point of it being is that, however, for those of us in our stage of life to come up with that recipe that you mentioned,
Yeah. Yeah.
now I've got a better idea of what I like and what I don't like and what's important to me and what I'm good at, but I might not fully realize it without that self-reflection, that self-awareness, kind of taking stock of myself, correct?
Yes.
Is that what you have
Correct.
people do, basically?
Oh, absolutely. And, I always talk about that. We do a lot of journaling, and I do a lot of journaling is just on an ongoing basis. And it's that either a cup of coffee or a glass of wine in my hand, and I, kind of sit down and take that moment each day for reflection. And, I tell people all the time that I set a daily intention, and it's something that kind of guides me throughout my day, that it keeps me kind of centered. And you're right, it's that opportunity, and it can be such an exciting time. I mentioned to you before about imagine if what would it look like if I mean, like, it's exciting. And taking that time to really draw from, because day-to-day life clouds our thinking. And so to take that time to really pause and reflect and honor that voice screaming inside of us. Yeah, and it takes a very, I practice mindfulness. And so part of it is getting people to think about taking a moment and being very mindful about that moment in time, and, moving forward in their day, in their week, in their month, in that way, being very mindful and thoughtful about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And what worked for me, and I do believe in, the power of intention, is that, and what's even got me to the point where I am right now and what I'm doing, was that I got really fundamental. And I literally thought, okay, first of all, how do I want to feel? When I wake up in the morning, how do I want to feel? Okay, well, it starts with, well, I feel healthy and I feel good and I feel excited. But then, I started taking it, from there. And I started realizing, well, what would it take for feeling? Well, interacting with wonderful, blah, 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 blah. But also taking my skills and experience and not doing what I had been doing, but doing something, taking those same skills and wrapping them and applying them in a different way. And that kind of leads to my next question, which is, I know for even myself and for a lot of people, it's a challenge to look at what you can do as well as what you want to do, or looking at your skills and experience in an entirely different context in the way that you've been applying them in the past. Correct? And if so, how do you change that perspective?
Yeah, it takes time, obviously. And for most of us, it's first looking at, I've taken out the word career work out of my vocabulary, just like I try to take out retirement. But I always tell people, instead of saying career and work, let's use utilizing my time and talents. And I get them to reflect on how is it right now, whether it's, if they're really stuck, I ask them to tell me about their day. What did their day look like today? Or the last couple of days? What do they do? And what I do is I give them feedback. So what you're saying is that meeting that you led, that you were talking about facilitating. And do you enjoy that? Is that something that you really enjoy doing and something you'd like to continue doing? And so we start to pull from what they say as, yeah, what's a big deal about that? And then we get them to kind of look at how to using that skill or that talent. Is that something that empowers them to that, like if somebody said to me, being in front of a group of people, speaking to groups of people, and they would see me light up because I love that, right? I know that I draw energy from that. Well, I pick up the same kind of nuances when I'm working with someone, and I'll say, God, you really lit up like that. It must be, you must love doing that. So let's make a note of that, because that's something moving forward. You want to use that skill, that time, that talent, whatever it is. And so it's really getting them to look at their day to day, and they'll tell me what they do want to do and what they don't want to do anymore. And that's where we start pulling those things. But it's me being that objective person that starts labeling the talents that they just outlined for me, that they don't see as talents, but I do.
Yeah, that's really great advice, and that's a great process for anyone to do, to find their way forward, because this very situation is hitting people of all ages and of all situations, given the pandemic and the way that it is changing the world in terms of economics and profession and life. And I'll further back up and circle back to something else you said, and that's journaling.
Yeah.
Which is, for me, what I found is that in the first place, coming to the conclusions that you're talking about, the self-awareness conclusions, it's like peeling an onion. You go, oh yeah, it's this. And then a couple of weeks later, oh, wait a minute, it's even deeper than that, or it's more significant, and you're peeling the onion. And the other thing I'll say that I've heard from so many thought leaders, and for instance, as Tim Ferriss has said, the person who wrote the 4-Hour Work Week and Tools of Titans, which I have over here, which is just this great advice from hundreds of people who are successful in a myriad of life, is that the one common trait he found amongst successful people, successful in life, whatever endeavor, was that they journal.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Thing is that they journal. And by the way, I would add journaling first thing in the morning before any electronics. As he calls, I tap my monkey brain, meaning you don't have these external concerns and other people's agendas interfering with your brain, to absolutely journal every day.
Yeah, yeah. And my journals, it's funny because I love looking back over time. I probably have been journaling, I'm going to say, since maybe the last 10 years. I didn't really take the time before to do that. And my journaling has taken on different looks. In fact, I just redid how I want to journal moving forward, right? At least for right now. But when I look back, the lessons that I glean from that, or the consistencies that I see of who I am and who I was and what was important to me, it's amazing to me. You just write some things down. It doesn't have to be a lot. I'm not a filled like many pages. I might do half a page or whatever. But the things that I glean from that is just amazing to me. And that's why it's so important when I work with someone that we focus a lot on journaling and as a tool to, again, like we spoke about a moment ago, utilizing time and talents. What does that look like, and listening. It's the only time we can actually listen is by writing it down.
Yeah, what I love about it, so many things. That number one, it's that private conversation with yourself. No one ever has to see what you're journaling. Number two, there is the reticular activation system, which literally, because you're writing it down, your brain absorbs it and does more with it than if it's spoken or certainly just thought in your head. And you're right, going back and look at it, I get two among many emotions, of course, I get two. One is cringeworthy. Oh my gosh, I said that, or I felt that. Oh, man, I am so, no, we all have those. But then the second one is seeing progress.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, I was so wrapped up in that, and I've like discarded it, or I have embraced it, or something like that. But even if I don't look back at it, every time I journal, I feel great. By the way, here's a little unpaid product endorsement.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with this?
I am not. No.
Oh, this is called the 5-minute journal.
Okay,
And
I can do that. Yeah.
Again, it was a Tim Ferriss recommendation. Let me open it up where you can't read anything. And what I love about it, it takes 5 minutes. And what I love about it is that every day, every morning, 3 things that you're grateful for, 3 things that would make today great, and an affirmation. And then before you go to bed, 3 amazing things that happened today and what would have made today better.
That's fabulous.
And it's got a little quote on top of it, and it takes 5 minutes.
I love that.
I tell you, everyone I've turned onto that book keeps thanking me for it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's amazing. But also the more extensive journaling can be helpful too. So.
Yes. Yeah.
So before I ask my last question,
okay,
what is the best way for people to get in touch with you?
A couple different ways. First of all, they can always email me, and that is autumn@designretirement.org. That's one way. Again, it's autumn@designretirement.org. They can always call 215-870-2960. Certainly my website at www.designretirement.org. And to get a sense of what I look at as being part of an intentional life, they can always follow my Facebook or LinkedIn, because I always am posting things there that are relevant to what this intentional life planning looks like. I'm pulling articles from Andy Cohen with the Tapas Life to Next Avenue, which is one of my favorite go-to. Richard Eisenberg, who you have talked to, he is amazing. I love that publication. So I'm always pulling what I think is the best of the best. And I'm a curator, as I tell people, of content. And so I'm always pulling things. And so a great way to get a sense of what intentional life planning looks like is to follow me on Facebook or LinkedIn. I have a company page, I have a personal page, and they, follow me either way.
So one last question. What is your intention in terms of the impact that you're hoping to have on the world, society, but certainly the women's lives who you engage with? What is your intention?
Well, my intention is always, if I take it from a really high level, to leave each person I meet with or talk with a little better off, right? After working with me. That's kind of the big, in the sky. But it's about, I went through, it sounds great when I talk about that mirror conversation that I had, but I got to tell you, what I didn't share with you is what happened after I left that hospital, after I brought him home, and the agony and the hours and all the things that I did to get to where I am today, which led me to wanting to save other women from that same experience and from feeling, and so that's my largest mission, is to save other women from having to go through the months of what I went through to get where I am today. And it could be women that are facing post-career life, but it could also be women who want work to play a much smaller role in their life, and to have look at all the roles. So it's really about, again, preventing others from going through that same agonizing process, and teaching them also a procedure, not procedure, process that they can then use on their own on an annual basis to create a new intentional life plan for the next 12-month period. So it's about teaching, it's about, helping them, it's about educating, but it's again about helping them get on the path to their own intentional life.
That's great. And I might add that when you thrive, others thrive as a result of you thriving. Whether it's, I've talked to people who've started entrepreneurial endeavors later in life. Paul Tasner, who started a business at age 66, and he's like, my granddaughter thinks I'm really cool.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? He's leaving a legacy with her. He's showing her what life can be like, period, let alone in this life. When you're healthy, when you're happy, when you're engaged, you make everybody healthy and happy as a result of it. So wonderful insight, wonderful advice, Autumn. Thank you so much. If you found this helpful, there's so much more on New Way Forward. A couple of video suggestions, the ultimate thing. Click the New Way Forward logo. That'll take you to newwayforward.com, newwayfwd.com, which has everything we have on it. And we are adding to it sometimes almost daily. And it also gives you access to subscribing, where you'll get a regular update, a weekly newsletter. You won't get spammed. I'm not going to sell your email address. And you have access to my first ebook, and more are in the works.
You've been listening to A New Way Forward vodcast with your host, Paul Long.